Welcome to Alchemy in the Kitchen. It's a rainy day here in Somerset, England today, so I thought what better to do on a rainy day than bake a cake. And I thought that what I would do is bake a cake with some leftovers. So here is a rather delightful rhubarb and elderflower gin. Beautiful colour as well. So that was made by soaking 2 stalks of rhubarb chopped up into little 1 inch, 2 centimetre chunks, and about 5 or 6 heads of elderflower clusters with a little bit of sugar, put in the jar, and then some gin poured over the top. For 3 days you just occasionally shake the fruit in the gin to make sure all of the sugar is absorbed and dissolved, and then you leave it for a month and you arrive with this rather tasty, beautifully coloured gin. So I thought, rather than waste all of that lovely gin soaked fruit, I'm going to put it in a cake. So I'm going to make a Madeira based cake so that it's dense enough to be able to cope with the weight of the fruit. And in that cake I am going to use this sugar, which has been steeping in layers of meadow sweet flowers and sugar to give it a really lovely aroma and flavour. And then with the rest of that sugar I will turn it into a flower syrup, and this is an elderflower syrup. So I will show you how to make a flower syrup, really easy, with the remains of that one once I've taken some sugar out of it for the cake. And then, as a Madeira cake I find is quite dry, I was thinking along the lines of a lemon drizzle. So what I'm going to do instead of the lemony drizzle is I'm going to use a bit of this elderflower syrup to drizzle over the top of the cake. And that will go with the rhubarb and elderflower flavour. A Madeira cake is really simple because you're basically just putting all of the ingredients in together. So I've lit the oven already, gas mark 3. I will put all of the conversions, measurements and everything on my website, www.louisa-shawnee.com, on the blog, and then you can see the recipe written down. So in here we have 6 ounces of softened butter, and then we're going to add to that all of the other ingredients. So we have 8 ounces of self-raising flour, we have 6 ounces of the sugar that I've separated out from the meadow sweet, and the rest of the meadow sweet and sugar mix I put in a saucepan for you, and I will show you how to make the syrup later. And in here we have 3 large eggs that I've already lightly beaten till they're mixed. So that's all going to go in together, and then I am going to mix that with the mixer. So there we are, all mixed. As I said, really simple. This was a go-to recipe that I used to use when my children were little, making them decorated novelty cakes. And this would make the base for those cakes, and you can add your flavouring. It could be chocolate, it can be lemon and orange, whatever you fancy. And it's a really stable, easy to make and delicious cake. So our flavouring for today is, of course, our rhubarb and elderflower gin soaked, which I have chopped up in the chopper just so that it would mix into the cake a lot easier. So we are literally just mixing this into the Madeira cake. You don't have to worry about folding. It's not a Victoria sponge or a sponge cake. As I said, it's the denseness of this cake that really we are after. So there we are. prepared the tin. I'm using a loaf tin because that's the shape that I want. This is a £2 loaf tin, but the mix would fit into a 7-inch round tin or a 6-inch square tin, just to give you an idea of your quantities and sizes. So we just put the mixture into the tin. Okay, so that now goes into your preheated oven. As I said earlier, that was gas mark 3. It's going to go in for about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. So that's between 75 and 90 minutes. So I would check it after that. So now on to the flour syrup. So having taken the sugar that I wanted out of the sugar and meadowsweet layers, all of the sugar and meadowsweet all went into the saucepan, and it's equal proportions. So you're putting as much water in as you had solid sugar and flour. So all we're going to do with this is we're going to pop it on the hob on a very gentle heat, occasionally stirring until the sugar's all dissolved, and then allow it to just simmer gently for about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, something like that, just so that you're getting all of the flavour out of the flour. Okay, so our syrup has simmered for 15-20 minutes. Really, it's just so that the sugar can, we can lose a little bit of water and the sugar can start to syrup. I've already removed a fair bit of the plant material with a slatted spoon, and now we're going to strain through a piece of muslin, and I have a funnel to go into the bottle. Now this one particular flour syrup is going to look quite dark. It's not because meadowsweet itself is particularly dark, it's actually because I used a soft brown sugar, because that's actually all I had. So ordinarily it would be a lighter syrup than this if you were using a white sugar. And that is basically that. You now have a flour syrup. Once it's cool, it can go in the fridge, and then I tend to use these syrups rather like you would use honey, or a golden syrup, or actually just instead of the sugar content in a cake or biscuits or something like that. And actually you can also put a little bit of it in a glass with some water or some hot water, and you've got a drink. It's not quite as nice as a cordial, but it's perfectly adequate. So there we are. There is your sugar syrup. Cake is out of the oven. I have done the knife test to check that it was ready. So that's just popping a clean knife in through and checking that it comes out clean, which for moist fruit inside, that is what one would call clean. So that's a cooked cake. It actually only took an hour. So whilst the recipe said an hour and 15 to an hour and a half, do check it after an hour. So whilst it's freshly out of the oven and still warm, I am going to drizzle on some of this elderflower syrup so that it'll absorb into the cake, keeping the cake moist. And usually when we make a drizzle for a cake, we would be mixing together something like lemon juice and icing sugar, so it creates like a little icing for the top. But because this is already a syrup, I'm not adding any more sugar in. I'm just going to allow that to soak into the cake while it's still in the tin. There, and that will make a lovely moist cake. So I'm going to leave it to cool in the tin, and then when it's finished cooling, take it out and put it on a plate and start eating. So there we are, there we have it. I will sit down so that you can see the top of my head. My apologies for the fact that most of the video meant that you couldn't see the top of my head. I do have a very small kitchen. I can't get my phone far enough away, and I am only recording on my phone. I know if I turn the phone the other way up, you'd get a the full length of me, but then you would have a very narrow view in your screen if you're watching on a larger screen or television. So I opted for you not seeing the top of my head. Enjoy your alchemy in the kitchen.